Good morning, Nation. John here. Thank you very much for being here this morning. As always, thank you to the moderators. Thank you for hitting subscribe down below the video. If you've done that, thumbs up and all that stuff. No short one this morning. I would love to go live more, but truthfully, I'm wearing a lot of hats over here, son. That's probably why I'm going bald. Part of the reason. Stress probably has something to do with it too, right? But I'm juggling a lot of things. Behind the camera in real life, stuff like this. Got other things to do as well. I wish I had 10, 12 hours a day to sink into YouTube. I just don't. Some days I can get away with it. So anyway, I want to say real quick, Melissa Buchanan, thank you very much, ma'am. You know why. And also hang in there. All right. Everybody has a purpose in life. Hang in there, ma'am. So we had our exclusive stream yesterday. That's going to replay here on YouTube this Saturday, sometime this Saturday evening. But anyway, during this live stream, I was talking about the prices going up, specifically on dog food and a couple of other things that we've noticed in stores. And I'd mentioned, I told the crowd over there, I said, research Depression era cooking and shortages and stuff like that, and also Venezuela, but specifically Depression era stuff. And after the stream closed down, I said, this would be a great topic to cover this morning in a video and actually give people, I'm going to give y'all 10 examples this morning of things that you can cook that are really, really, really cheap, that were highly popular during the Great Depression era for good reason. Again, because they're cheap and they yield a lot. They feed a lot of people, lots of calories and stuff in most of these meals. But please, as I'm listing these 10 things, and I'm going to explain why I think each one's a great meal, add whatever you want. If you know of a Depression era or even just something that feeds a lot of people, has a lot of bang for the buck, so to speak, feel free to add it. Yeah, it's great to stack survival food. It's great to stack canned food and stuff like this, but there are downfalls to it. Canned food typically has a lot of sodium. So that's something you want to watch. And while we're on that topic, I need to mention this. With sodium, you really need to watch that during a full-blown SHTF. And this is one of the reasons that I don't think a gallon of water a day is enough. I've said in the past, 3 to 5, I'm shooting for 5 and beyond if I can get it. But staying hydrated is one of the many keys to defeating too much sodium. But I digress. Here we go. Number 1, soup. Yes, again, canned soup works wonders. It will last on a shelf a long time. If you pick it up, it's very convenient. If you pick it up on sale, it's a really good item to stack. A decent soup in a can caught on sale, to me, is just as good as survival food because in the long run, you can stack more of it. It doesn't have the shelf life that survival food has, but it's a really good item. But again, with that sodium, right? So you can actually make soup a lot cheaper. Shout out to, and I'm not endorsed by Bear Creek. Man, they make some good soup mixes, though. We stack that stuff. But during the Great Depression, soup was one of the most popular items because soup allows you to take what you have, flavor it any way that you want to or that your family prefers it, and feed a lot of people for pennies on the dollar. I mean, soup is just an excellent, excellent item. It's just so cheap to make. So another reason that I like soup, and many of the items on the list today are going to fall in this category, you can use beans and rice, which is something, I mean, I've literally got, I've got a container of beans here that are Mylar. I've got rice underneath, and I mean, we just got lots of beans and rice. And so it does take a little bit longer to process because you got to soak the beans especially, but you can add it to soup as sort of a filler. It bulks the soup up. Again, it's very, very cheap. And then from there, you need soup stock. You need any kind of spices, probably salt and sugar, and anything that you have meat-wise. You can get away with vegetable soup at that point if you don't have meat. If you do have meat, I mean, you can use anything. You can put steak in there. You can put chicken in there. You can put deer meat, venison. That's pretty popular up in here in these hills. Deer stew and stuff like this. Yes, I know. Some of you are going to throw out squirrel and groundhog, and you can do it. Not, as I've said multiple times, not my first choice. Okay, I'm going with a different meat, but yeah, it can absolutely be done if you know what you're doing. And honestly, as somebody put in chat yesterday, a really good cook goes a long way in terms of a skill. So you can, if you're not a carpenter, if you're not into construction, you don't have any sort of medical training, but if you're a great cook, sometimes that's enough for a mag to take you in. You know what I'm saying? So perfect the soup. If you're a good cook, work on that. Number 2, loaded cornbread. I know it sounds weird. I've also heard it called hot tamale pie in my area. Now, I don't know if that's an actual term or not, but it's just cornbread. It has meat in it. It has vegetables in it, usually corn, green beans where I'm at, has butter thrown in there. I mean, there's not a whole lot to it. Then you fry it with a little bit of butter, and, a decent sized piece makes an entire meal. Again, for pennies on the dollar. And you can literally put whatever you have in there. And it's sort of like the soups in that you can flavor it in whatever capacity you want to. So number 3 comes directly from the Great Depression. It's literally called Hoover stew. Now, it may have a different name, but I know it as Hoover stew. And this is going to sound weird to some people, but think about how cheap this food is in a Hoover stew. That's why it was so popular, and how many people it would feed once you make this, okay? Pasta. How many preppers have tons of dry pasta, right? Just different kinds of noodles and things. Macaroni was very popular during the Great Depression, macaroni noodles. Tomatoes. Many of us have tomatoes, whether they're canned, whether they're out of the garden, etc. Hot dogs. So they would take hot dogs, they would cut these things up into slices. You might be able to use other meat. I don't know. Canned, like Vienna sausage, for example. Other meat. I'm sure you can, steak or whatever you happen to have. Corn or beans, or both if you have both. So this is essentially a soup, but it is absolutely the cheapest possible way that you can make it. Again, which is why it was called Hoover stew, and it was very, very popular during the Great Depression. Try not to have too much fun with this one, especially if Uncle Charlie and Forrester are in the chat, okay? Hoe cakes. Yes, literally they're called hoe cakes. I've also heard them called Johnny cakes. So what these are, if you've never had these are essentially pancakes, but they're made out of cornmeal. All right, and instead of using syrup, you throw a little bit of sugar in there as you're making it. Buttermilk, egg, I think a little bit of self-rising flour. You cook them just like pancakes. They get crispy on the outside, especially around the edges. You can eat these things all day long. I mean, that's essentially the best way to explain them, okay? Cornmeal pancakes, but again, hoe cakes and Johnny cakes if you're looking up the actual recipe online. Try that out. Very, very cheap. All right. You're not going to get a lot of protein there, but again, you can eat this alongside something else, maybe a meat entree or something. Number 5, meat and potato patties, which I realize sounds very, very weird. A Depression era recipe was just a slab of meat, whether it be, a steak or, ground steak or whatever, chopped steak, and then potatoes that were sliced, larger potatoes that were sliced and cooked the same way the meat patty was. A substitute for this, and this is very common, I think, all throughout the South, but definitely common in my area, fried potatoes. So a meat patty and fried potatoes, and then we just put a little bit of ketchup on the fried potatoes. Very simple to make. Potatoes, even in Joe's America, are still affordable. You're not going to be able to hang on to them Like they don't have a 35-year shelf life, the type you're going to need to fry up, but you can grow them. They're kind of easy to grow, right? So fried potatoes and meat, or potato patties and meat. So number 6, navy bean soup, which I am a fan of. I've never cooked it, but my wife's a great cook. Navy beans, diced ham, broth, the broth of your choice. Typically, it's going to be chicken or beef, diced tomatoes, and chopped onions. And you can take something out, put something in. Again, if you have a killer recipe for navy bean soup, please drop it in the chat or in the comments after the fact. There's something that, again, it doesn't even have to be ham per se. Usually I've seen it with ham. They kind of pair well. I sound like a chef over here, son, with navy beans. But if you don't have ham and you have a different kind of meat, yeah, absolutely, you can substitute it in there. Number 7, spaghetti. Just plain old spaghetti. But here's why I put spaghetti in there, all right? It's not necessarily a Great Depression meal, but it's a great meal because it's so cheap. Because not only is it cheap, but so many preppers have spaghetti noodles, going up to the sky almost. It's through the rafters on a lot of that stuff. Spaghetti is one of those things where, as long as you're cooking the noodles the way they're supposed to be cooked, the sauces are what makes the meal. So, sometimes we'll go with the red sauce. We do a lot of the canned sauces because they're cheaper. Sometimes we go with the jar of sauces because it's an orange sauce. I think it's a vodka based sauce or something. It tastes totally different than the tomato based sauces. And so you can eat spaghetti 2 different nights and it's 2 totally different meals. So spaghetti is something that's very cheap to cook, and it feeds a lot of people. Number 8, skillet noodles. So egg noodles, but the really, really small ones are preferred, or really, really thin, whatever you happen to have. Again, preppers have a lot of these. Peas, chicken broth is preferred. You can substitute it out, but I think it calls for chicken broth and butter. And you simply cook this stuff up. Pretty tasty, and same concept as spaghetti. Feeds a lot of people, very, very cheap. Again, preppers have noodles on hand, they have peas on hand, they have chicken broth or bouillon on hand, they have butter on hand. This is all stuff that you should already have buku of in your pantry. Number 9, sausage, potato, and cucumber. So that's the first time I'd heard of this recipe when I was researching for the video. Okay, the other stuff I've heard of, this one's new to me. Of course, I've eaten sausage and potato, and I'm talking about like the sliced smoked sausage and sliced potatoes and stuff, fried potatoes. But this adds cucumber, sliced cucumber in there as well. I'm assuming it's going to absorb the flavor of everything around it. And again, these are 3 things that you probably have in your pantry, as a prepper. So it also calls for salt, garlic, and butter. And most preppers have that on hand. This is going to feed a lot of people. You get some variety in there. And it's just like the entree and you're done, that sort of thing. So with survival, survival cooking and eating and all this stuff, you don't necessarily need, a 5-course meal. If an entree can hit different food groups at one time, why not, right? So finally, number 10, depression, meatloaf. You can go all over the place with this. I have literally had some of the good meatloaf that I've had is some of the best meatloaf I've ever, it's some of the best tasting food I've ever had. But I've also had meatloaf that was horrible. And some of the, I would not touch it with a 10-foot pole. So it depends on how it's cooked, and it depends on the person cooking it, honestly, to my experience. But depression meatloaf is going to add sliced bread in there. If you got some bread that's getting ready to expire and you're planning on making meatloaf anyway, just throw it in there. It's depression meatloaf. It's in there as a filler, but it's going to taste just like the meatloaf. It just bulks stuff up. You add red onion, ground beef, obviously, but you can substitute that with other meats if you don't have ground beef. Ketchup, I prefer meatloaf with ketchup, but some of the people in my family prefer it with like different kinds of sauces and stuff. So it is what it is. It's a preference thing. Salt and pepper. And again, with the salt, you're seeing that reoccurring theme with a lot of these recipes calling for salt, salt, salt. Be sure you have plenty of water. Um, and then you just take all that stuff, you wrap it in aluminum foil, you cook it the whole 9 yards. If you want the complete recipe, that's John proof and you can actually make something, it's called Depression Meatloaf. Just Google it. But these are 10 ideas. There are plenty of others out there. A lot of desserts are out there as well. I didn't include any desserts because I was trying to hit on stuff that preppers already have in their pantries. But I mean, straight up, the prices of food have gotten out of control, and there seems to be no end in sight. I just saw a dairy farm, some sort of explosion or something right before I'm recording this. Tons and tons of dairy cows lost in the explosion. So guess what? Dairy's going up now. And as I've said in the past, I think it's coordinated. It's part of a bigger plan. That's the conspiracy theorist in me. But either way, if you prep accordingly, you'll be just fine. All right, this is John with Prepper Nation. God love y'all for being here. Thank you very much. Have a great day.